Okay, get me to the first slide.
That's it.
Give me the next slide.
We're ready? Okay, I'll just start. Joining me today is Dr. Jack Taunton. He's a world-renowned sports medicine doctor and former medical chief officer for the 2010 Olympics. He is a co-founder and founder of the Vancouver Sun Run, the Vancouver Marathon, and Lionsgate Roadrunners. And he's here today to talk about a very important topic, which we should get more of, the importance of getting more sleep, sleep disorders. Welcome, Jack, or Dr. Taunton.
Yes, I am here. And we just got one little glitch here. Can we get this? Because we've lost that slide.
Oh, we just need to move you people. Here, what's it say?
Okay.
I can't.
Yes, sleep is natural. It's necessary for a healthy function and for restoration and healing. And sleep itself is critical in terms of recovery. Moderate exercise can help with sleep. Intense exercise, though, can interfere with sleep. And athletes should be aware of need for sleep and how to optimize their sleep. And more teams now have gone to utilizing sleep trainers, sleep consultants. And so that we're going to go through and look at sleep itself, and we'll start with sleep loss and injury. Sleep loss has been shown if fewer than 8 hours per night. And I'm sure everybody's thinking, look, I don't get 8 hours of sleep a night. And if you're a competitive athlete and you get fewer than 8 hours per night of sleep, that increases your injury rate by 1.7 times. So we can see how critical this is. And why do we need sleep? Physiological reasons, because it's involved in regeneration and repair of cells, repair of muscle, repair of tendon, repair in the brain. It protects your immunity. Enough sleep gives you adequate immunity to allow you to fight what we've got right now in terms of, and we've all gone through immunizations, and sleep's a big factor in terms of improving your immunity. And so that as we've all gone out for when having COVID shots, and that sleep itself will accentuate that. Also, sleep is very important in terms of controlling your glucose metabolism, which is very important for individuals that are in endurance sports where glucose is a main energy source. It's a big factor for the diabetic where they don't have adequate glucose metabolism. Now, in terms of the brain, sleep is involved in constructing new nerve ways to help learning, to help new activities. Like if you're just going out and starting golf, that you need to have new nerve ways established. It's involved in motor memory consolidation. So if you're a basketball player and you're out doing free throws, well, as you do more and more free throws, you get these airways get consolidated and they become permanent. And that's why it becomes virtually automatic. And it's a part of your mental health, for your mental well-being. So sleep is critical. And for so long, people have felt, oh, I'm strong. I can go without a couple of days of sleep. And students that are competing at school for exams, and then I can remember writing my medical exams and then showing up when we completed after our medical exams, there was the Vancouver Marathon. And I can remember the challenge, of trying to, run in the low 220s after, a week of studying with very little sleep, and how that was such a challenge. And so that sleep is really important in terms of your mental health. Now, the phases of sleep, the first phase is non-rapid eye movement sleep. So NREM, non-rapid eye sleep, has 3 stages. Slow wave sleep, and where your breathing rate, your heart rate is slowed. There's an increase in the secretion of growth hormone. Well, once we've stopped growing, for the young kids, sleep is critical for them to get their natural growth pattern. If they don't get enough sleep, because of the house situation they're in, they're watching computers all the time, they won't get their natural growth height. But growth hormone also is a very important hormone in terms of controlling your energy, controlling blood sugar, and controlling your blood pressure. And it's, as we've mentioned, sleep, and it's the non-rapid eye movement sleep is very important in learning and motor memory consolidation. And that's what we want as an athlete, particularly if you're in a skilled sport, in terms of that motor memory, consolidation. And that can be distance running, that can be playing golf, that can be playing other team sports, where you need to remember the plays, and your motion is so critical. And if you're watching, the tennis players yesterday and looking at their motor activity. So there's the other form of sleep is rapid eye movement sleep. And this is when we dream and we have the rapid eye movement. And this is when the brain undergoes the greatest reorganization, where you're really solidifying the material you're trying to learn, whether it's learn your times table when you're a child, or learning new activities, or learning for a presentation, or go and to learn a new skill, like a new format in the computer, which we've just gone through. And it activates the brain during the rapid eye movement, and that includes the motor cortex. So that's the muscle movement, and the coordinated muscle movement is so critical. And so that dream state is the rapid eye movement. Brain is getting reorganized and it's getting consolidated so that your activity to run faster gets established. And it's getting faster because it's allowing the motor cortex to drive your muscles in a coordinated fashion, but in a faster way. This could be cross-country running and to learn how to adjust to up and down hills, going over routes and trails, so that the 2 types of sleep are critical. How much sleep do we need? And as we said, the maximum is a minimum of, you can squeeze it at 7 hours per night, but it's ideally at 8 hours a night. And this sleep must be undisturbed, not fragmented. So if you're constantly going to sleep and waking and going back to sleep, that's not that recovery kind of sleep that we want. And so it's really essential. And our goal is to ensure that we've got an ideal amount is at least 7 hours per night is our goal. 8 is ideal. And we can show studies, and more studies are being done, that if you can increase your sleep time by 2 hours, your injury rate goes down and your ability to excel. And they've shown this in basketball players and baseball players and tennis players, that if we could get everybody to increase their sleep to that 8 hours, would make our job an awful lot easier by reducing injuries, but it makes the coach a lot happier because the individuals learn skills that much better and maintain those skills because they get organized within the brain itself. And it makes you feel much more confident that with that sleep, that your performance will increase and you can reach your personal best. And there's a number of people that just can't reach. They've done everything in terms of their training, but they just can't reach their PBs in running because they just haven't established the organization within the brain to give you that ability to reach your goals. And so training, competition, and sleep disturbance. An evening competition or games, that disrupts your sleep. Early morning or late evening practices are challenges. These ensure that your sleep will not be recuperative. So evening competitions are tough. And so you've got to train a lot in the evening. You can't be a distance runner and all of a sudden show up to do an evening race. And if you haven't done them, a lot of them, that you just won't be able to compete. Similarly, for athletes that are having very early morning and late evening practices to go twice a day, like the swimmers are constantly, doing that. So training early and late evening practices are a real challenge for sleep. And competition the night before disrupts the sleep the next night. Intense training is very difficult to get restful sleep. And the other is travel. Travel is worse within the number of time zones crossed over 2 time zones. So you need 1 day of recovery per time zone to recover. So if you're flying from Vancouver to Toronto, you can go 1 time zone across Alberta. You'll be fine. But if you're going to Toronto, you're going into 3 time zones. And so you need 2 are fine. You've got an extra time zone. So that means you need to be there an extra day to adapt and to get your sleep readjusted so that you can perform at your best in Toronto. So hopefully that's clear to everybody. It's the time zones. 2 time zones going either way for us, either going east or west, are within our ability to adapt. But once you get into 3 time zones or more, you're going to Halifax. And our daughter lives in Halifax. And so there, you're 4.5 time zones. And so there you need an extra time zone is fine, but you've got virtually 2 extra days that you need to get adequate, restful sleep. So sleep disturbance is also associated with the type of sport you're in. 50% of elite athletes have been shown to have sleep disturbance. That's a lot. 60% of non-elite athletes have been shown to have sleep disturbance. And these are athletes that are developmental athletes. This is when you're first starting off in your running career or your career as a hockey player or as a soccer player, as the young athletes that are coming along. Like we have 4 super athletes that are our grandchildren. And so that they're in the developmental stage where sleep is critical. Sleep is critical for the growth. It's critical for injury recovery, but it is important for them to get non-interrupted sleep. And athletes from individual sports may go to bed earlier, they may wake up earlier, but they get less sleep than team sports. So team sport athletes do better. Individual sport athletes are more at risk.
Mm.
Even if they try to go to bed earlier and as a means of trying to make up for this, that's not adequate enough. And so that their sleep is disrupted as compared to their teammate that's on the soccer team or on a baseball team or any individual team sport. So sleep disturbance and the type of sport. Sleep disturbances are seen more commonly in athletic sports. So that's your gymnasts, your figure skaters, where there's grading done on your performance. High risk sports, like in aerials, in skiing, ski racing, the aerial athletes, the high risk athletes have been shown to have less sleep disturbance. They can somehow adapt to that high risk and get good sleep and don't suffer the sleep disturbance. That other individuals that are often at a submaximal aerobic training and competition that could be in a team sport, which should be at less risk for them. But if their work is done more submaximally, maximal exercise is tolerated better, but you have to have adequate recovery days. And so for the real endurance athletes, like your Tour de France athletes, which are cycling right now, or the Tour of Italy athletes, and we've got a young Canadian who rides for a team out of Montreal. Believe it or not, it's called Israeli, but they're Canadians, and and he is now in the Tour of Italy, which is very, very hilly this year. He won a stage and came second in a stage of the real climbers. But those individuals that are really at maximal levels for long periods of aerobic competition, those individuals do well. The other group that do well are those in strength training and sprint events. And so that, Cheryl, if you can take that, that's for the, those with strength training doesn't disrupt your sleep. And sprinting events on its own are really well tolerated. So training and sleep disturbance. So as we mentioned, training for strength sports doesn't result in sleep disturbance. Really high intense sport training that doesn't have the recovery days may cause unfavorable sleep patterns. So if you're doing really high intense interval training, you've got to ensure that you have recovery days to allow your sleep to be tolerable. Sleep disturbances can decrease recovery, and there may be a need for greater recovery between training sessions. So for most people, a day on, a day off concept. Some people in the early phases of where they really are switching into high intense training for an upcoming cycle race, an upcoming marathon, or sport event, they have to ensure so that they get adequate recovery. And it's not just mental recovery, it's recovery that's controlled by the brain, but recovery in your muscles and the nerves. And as sleep time is reduced, the athlete may perceive the exercise load as harder. It's greater and more difficult. Their perceived exertion is often what you'll read about. How did that feel out of 10? And the perceived exertion, 10 out of 10 is really, really tough. And so as their sleep time is reduced, they have more days of 8 and 9. That was just a grind. And so that you've got to ensure that you have that at least 7 hours of sleep so that your perception of the exercise load is not greater and the task is not more difficult and is not perceived as more fatigue. So sleep can alter your ability to follow that workout because it feels so difficult. So I hope that's clear, that as sleep time is reduced, that the exercise load feels harder, it's more difficult, and it's received as more fatigue. So sleep deprivation then affects your mental function. It affects your both aerobic and anaerobic performance. And even the sprinters, which don't normally have difficulty with sleep alteration in their performance, that if they add poor sleep on top of that, despite the fact most sprinters don't have trouble with sleep, that your sleep can be a factor for both aerobic and anaerobic sport. It shouldn't affect your strength, but if you've got sleep deprivation, you go 1 to 2 days of poor sleep because of travel or because of the stress of work, because of the stress of the studies that you've got. The other thing is with sleep deprivation, it affects your immunity, affects your ability, particularly with the lower deep respiratory infections, bronchitis, pneumonia. You're more susceptible to these chronic recurrent infections of the lung, so that your immunity, and that's what happens with COVID. Where does it attack? It attacks the brain, it attacks your lungs, and it attacks your heart. And that's why individuals have chronic cough and that they continue to have almost like asthma. And if you are asthmatic, your asthma will get worse. So sleep disturbance will alter your immunity to control those viruses and bacteria that affect especially your respiratory system. So what can sleep deprivation do to the athlete as an example? 1 to 2 nights of total sleep loss or 1 to 2 nights of partial sleep impair your cognitive function. That's the ability to think, remember, if you're taking classes that require a lot of cognitive thinking. It's a new computer course or something like that. That gets impaired. That's 1 to 2 nights of total sleep loss, or 1 to 2 weeks of partial sleep. It impairs your learning and your memory. It decreases your mental well-being, where you feel like they describe with COVID. I felt I was in a constant brain fog. It was hard to complete tasks. And that sleep deprivation, as we mentioned, decreases your growth pattern. And that growth can be regeneration to heal a stress fracture, to heal a ligament injury, and for the younger athletes to reach their ultimate, what would have been predicted as their growth, because it decreases the function of the cells that heal tendons, the fibroblasts, the cells that replace and repair your muscles, the myocytes. So you're more susceptible to tendon injuries and muscle injuries. And at the same time, these cells which do the healing with sleep deprivation are impaired. How to improve sleep? Napping during the day, up to 2 hours at maximum, and ideally in the mid part of the day helps considerably. And learning and implementing sleep strategies, understand the impact of sleep disturbance on performance and mental function. May need to have a sleep assessment. So there are now individuals, physiologists and neurologists, that specialize in sleep disturbance and give you tricks with your demands, how to adapt your sleep, how to ensure that you do nap during the day, and how are we going to work this out with our schedule. For you, Christine, and where you're doing filming in the morning and throughout the day, how can I fit into my busy schedule a period of time, an hour and a half, maximum 2 hours, but to have a nap? It's not a weakness. It, in fact, is something which will help your performance in terms of making your movies, performing both at work, school, and with your sport. So that there now are sleep consultants that you can work with that can look at different strategies to help you with sleep itself. And studies have been done with a couple large ones with collegiate basketball players, and they increased their sleep time by 2 hours, and it increased their sprint time, and it increased their accuracy of free throws. And if you're an outside shooter, their accuracy went up 10 to 12%. Also in tennis, it increased serving accuracy. You want to put that ball in that corner, and you could do that if you increased your sleep by 2 hours. Baseball players, and they've done some big studies in the States, both with the professionals and national team baseball players and top collegiate players. With baseball players, improved visual attention. You could watch that ball. You could almost in your brain slow the ball down through the new cognitive patterns. And that improves pitching recognition. When you're in the ball, in the batter's box, you could see that ball coming and you could say, that is a drop ball. That ball is going to be at eye level, but it's going to drop to the level of your shoulders or even more. And you can pick that up early. So your batting percentage and accuracy increases. And they've just completed a study with swimmers, national team swimmers, and it improved their competitive times in swimming by just doing nothing else but adding 2 extra hours to your sleep. So there's now enough research in enough different sports that the simplest thing you could do with yourself and with athletes that you may coach, simply adding 2 hours each night of extra sleep. So that there are now more articles. There's an excellent one in the British Journal of Sports Medicine that I've highlighted in the green. Improved situations that present when you have risk factors to sleep, to disrupt and cause habitual sleep performance problems. When incorporating strategies to sleep and performance, taking into account other factors that may impact your results. If you've got an ongoing inflammation, arthritis, you got an ongoing illness, you've got chronic pneumonia, you've got asthma, you're diabetic, these factors can disrupt sleep. And researchers are encouraged to take on the responsibility for improving the quality of evidence of sleep and athletic performance. And also to ensure that the studies, and I know that most of the people that will be listening, that most of them are not in this to do a research study on themselves, but there are enough people through departments of kinesiology that are interested in helping teams with sleep disturbance. And so they can ensure that there is randomization in the study, that there is adherence to the different protocols. Are we going to do it increase by an hour? Or can we go an hour and a half, and that can give you the 20 to 25% improvement of your performance if you're a basketball player or a tennis player? And how to handle if you're missing data. So we recommend a research method consensus meeting be held with the group that you're training with, particularly if you're a performance athlete for BC, for Canada, so that it's really important that we get on the bandwagon in terms of looking at the data that's coming out and to ensure that it is good. But what I've presented to you with the baseball, with the basketball, with the tennis players, with the swimmers, that is well established now research over the last few years. And we just want to see more of it. And you take a look at the Canucks. They've got a sleep trainer with them. You take a look at the national basketball team, and they're doing a lot of traveling so that they're looking for sleep consultants. So if somebody's interested in an area in performance, this is one area that could be a big component of what you do and how you can really make a difference to the team itself. And so that particularly if you're with a sport that does a lot of travel, that where you cross, more than 2 time zones, and how can we help that? So future research needs to focus on sleep interventions that access strength. And strength usually is one of the ones that is more resilient to sleep disturbance. Outcomes in athletic populations. What about seniors? What about the ultra distance runners, where they do periods of sleep restriction because the performance is just so long? And so different trials in sleep and on performance. And what about early morning heats for the Olympic swimmers? and national tasks in terms of helping them. So travel and jet lag, preparation for travel and making the flight can cause anxiety and interfere with sleep, especially if the flight is early morning. Jet lag occurs when you cross time zones, as we talked about. There's a difference in jet lag when traveling east versus traveling west. And it's easier for individuals to come here than it is for us to go there. And there may be value in melatonin is an agent now which is becoming much more popular to try to alter the brain activity in terms of sleep disturbance. More evidence is coming out, but you need to check with your physician to ensure that some people react adversely to melatonin, but others, it's really an answer. And the other thing, it's very useful if you exercise after the flight or use bright lights after a long flight. And so you find a place in the hotel where there's bright lights, maybe in the restaurant or whatever. And that bright light can help stimulate the brain itself and to disrupt the natural tendency of impairment of proper sleep. And other factors, when you travel, new environment, a hotel room, or if you're billeted, it's unfamiliar, that can disrupt your sleep. Possibly a roommate who has different sleep habits if you're billeted. Social media can be a factor. If you watch the news, that can sometimes get you hyped up. The stress of the competition is obviously a factor. Different foods can be a factor on your sleep. Altitude. Mountaineers will find this for sure. That if you're climbing or the competition, you're going to Mexico City, and just the fact of being at altitude can disrupt your sleep. Heat and humidity are definite factors. So as it gets more humid around here, and for some people, too much air conditioning is a factor. So while evidence is scarce, there is evidence that shows high carbohydrate meals can help you fall asleep earlier. Taking caffeine, tea, coffee, some of the energy drinks may increase the time to fall asleep and decrease sleep time and sleep quality. Supplements that tout assistance with sleep shouldn't be taken without advice, because on many of these things, they'll come up with a positive drug test or other health issues. So there's little evidence of their value. Don't take melatonin without advice. And you got to find out what's the correct use for you. So the best practices, adequate sleep, so we can summarize this, 7 to 9 hours for adults, 8 to 10 for adolescents. Athletes may need more for adequate recovery, and you've got to adjust it. If you're going through a really hard training period, you've got to have easy days and you've got to have more sleep. That's where you add the 2 hours. Napping should be encouraged, and a minimum of 30 minutes, but you can go up. Don't go over 2 hours, midday ideally. And determine if you're a morning or a night person. If possible, avoid training times in the morning or the late night if you happen to be a morning or a night person. You need to know who you are. And that's where the sleep consultants come in. Athletes must be aware of good sleep hygiene. And so what's good sleep hygiene? Avoid caffeine, alcohol, very heavy meals in the evening. Avoid screen time close to bedtime. Keep the phones on mute or off to prevent being aroused by texts and calls or lights that go on, flash on from your phone that you've just had a message. Make sure your room is cool and dark. And once you're awake in the morning, get up, open the blinds, and get out for a walk to allow that natural light. And remember, sleep disruption affects recovery. It affects performance. It increases the percentage of injury. And to be your best, you must have adequate sleep quality. And you may need a sleep assessment, and they are available. And if you're on a high performance team, you'll meet some of them. And they're not there to disrupt you. They're there to find out what kind of a person you are and what's the best strategy for their sleep. So I hope that made you think. And I hope it challenged you to think, how can I add 2 hours and get that increased performance that Jack's talked about? But it's true, it's there. And so, Christine, I hope that helps you with your work and with your busy days that you have and others. Because it's tough when you're adding performance at work, performance at school, performance on the track or the road, so that sleep is a factor. We now recognize how important it is.
Great information, Dr. Jack Taunton. And I learned, don't feel guilty taking a nap. So I will do that. And great information, as I said. And thank you so much.
Well, everybody, get your nap tonight. Try it this next week. Add 2 hours a night and see if you're now learning how to play golf or an avid golfer, like we had on the weekend, are since 1954 the first Canadian winner of the Canadian Open. So be interesting to see, like those tournament people, they go through a lot of stress, and how do they manage their stress? You know, are they individuals that take melatonin? And I know some do for sure, because they've had to fly there and so on. So all the best, and we'll see you in the future.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for being
Great.
on
Well,
the show.
thank you all. Take care now. Bye-bye now. Very good.
Thank you, Jack. It was
Well, thank
wonderful.
you. It's great to see you again.
You too. Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.